love this song.
Yeah.
Can I have that played every time I come in? Yeah, no, I love the good old Demi Lovato. Yeah, so let me get comfortable on this chair without falling over, looking like a fool. All right, here we go. So yeah, no, this is this thing called Explorers with Keegan. I think this chapter is, thank you. It's fun because it's sort of what I tried to do with the book is sort of explain in some way the weird kind of life that we have as actors, and especially with this show where, you know, we can do things like in this book, I had to go and do this Instagram post so that I could pay for something for a family member. And I have this weird sort of thing about, you know, selling out and like just kind of, it's a long thing. Anywho, I will read this chapter quickly, but I think it's somewhat funny, hopefully. So here we go. Explorers with Keegan. Okay. Keegan Allen, dear friend, co-star, and photographer extraordinaire, sat across from me at Dialogue Cafe, a small family-run spot in West Hollywood just down the street from the more intimidatingly named Viper Room and Rock Hard Films. So how long does this video need to be? He asked me. Only like 6 seconds. You can shoot it on your phone, I think. So I don't need any of these today? He pointed to 3 cameras hanging around his neck. I had told him we were going hiking, and that on the hike we would have to take photos that I had to post on Instagram. Keegan dressed appropriately, while I, on the other hand, had opted not to shave or sleep the night before. We polished off our now watery iced coffees. Looking out the window, I took in the traffic on Sunset Boulevard. Houses dotted the hills above us, and the sunshine was finally cutting through the June gloom. In the cafe, we were surrounded by young parents, all of whom seemed to be shockingly well rested. The shop was crowded with baby strollers, but none of the babies had cried even once. They all just lay there with these eerily serene looks on their calm faces. Can babies get Botox? I wondered. Maybe they couldn't even cry. Several patrons sat with open laptops resting next to half-eaten pastries. Screenwriters, most likely, or accountants, or anyone really, but I always assume that if you're in a cafe with a laptop open, you're probably writing the next Jaws. Thanks again for helping me shoot this, I said. Of course, man. Keegan wiped the lens off his Leica. And don't feel bad about doing this stuff for money. Everyone does it. Besides, you're helping your family, and in a few months, no one will remember or care about a little video you shot in the woods. I'd been having second thoughts about this photo shoot since the moment I signed on. I was beginning to worry that my social media page might someday look like the side of a race car, plastered with ads and logos, having little, if anything, to do with my personality, with the personality of the page's original creator. It was a scary thought. How are you getting the photos to the company that hired you? Keegan asked. I think I'll probably just email them over. I can do that, right? Keegan sighed dramatically. Oh, thank God, Ian. I thought you were about to say like passenger pigeon or something. Hilarious, Keegan. First off, those are extinct. Second, you're thinking of homing pigeon, which are actually still used. Did people ever like ride those? Like passenger pigeons back in the day. Could they ever actually ride them? Like how big are they? Were they... He spread his arms out wide. Were they like bus-sized? Are you asking me if the Flintstones happened in real life? Keegan stared at me in silence for a moment, then downed the remainder of his iced coffee. That was a true interaction that happened. Here's a sentence I don't always like to say out loud. I have a branding agent. Her name is Jean Kowalik, and she's lovely. Jean attaches her clients, mostly actors, to various commercial campaigns, which supplement their income between acting gigs. You look really good with 3-day stubble? She can help you sell whiskey. Never had dandruff? Easy. Hair commercials. It isn't always that blatant either. There are increasingly lucrative ways for people in the public eye to make a little dough on the side without looking like total sellouts. That's an interesting word, by the way. I struggle with it constantly. Sellout. The term has always carried a strange gravity in my mind, and it was echoing back and forth in my head that day. I felt a bit off using my acting for purely financial gain. But 2 months earlier, my sister Sarah had been granted a slot in a highly selective Directors Guild training program in New York. Both she and I had rejoiced at the news of this opportunity, but our rejoicing quickly came to an end when we began to consider how she would pay for it. Sarah would be working as a PA in New York and would have a couple of hours here and there to Uber or walk dogs on the side, but she wouldn't be making nearly enough money to support herself in New York City. For Sarah, this opportunity was a dream come true. I gave it some thought and I decided to play fairy godbrother. I called my sister and I told her I wanted to cover her rent for the 2 years she'd be living in the Big Apple. That way she could focus entirely on learning and working in the field she's always loved. The news brought tears to her eyes, and when I told my accountant about it, she nearly cried as well. After I told Sarah that I intended to cover her rent, I immediately emailed Gene and my manager Vikram, and I asked him to help me find campaign work, anything they could find that didn't involve an actual deal with the devil. So how far away is this waterfall? Keegan asked, holding one of his cameras up to the window and snapping away at the passing scenery. We were driving along the Angeles Crest Highway as it wound its way up from La Cañada Flint Ridge through the Angeles National Forest. We were headed to Switzer Falls. Can't be more than like 20 minutes or so. Did they say why they wanted this waterfall in particular? No, it was my idea. The company just needs me to tape myself having fun, and I told them I wanted to do a hike because it's something I actually do. A short while later, I spotted our turn and hung a sharp right. We passed some serious-looking road bikes and proceeded down a winding hill towards Switzer Falls. The last time I went on this hike, it was 2014. It had been a wet-ish winter. Not wet enough to break the drought, but it was a welcome change for us. And the falls had taken on the appearance of, well, actual waterfalls. I had hiked out early one morning after a late winter rain with a few friends from college. The falls had bellowed loudly as we approached them at the end of the trail. I put my head under... What did I write? Oh, there we go. What did I say? I had put my head under, and the force of the water blew my hat off. That was then, and this was now. And by now, I mean it was the Tuesday in July, and the weather service was predicting another day of record-breaking heat. We pulled into a parking spot by a picnic table. Looks pretty parched out there. Are you sure there's any water going over the falls right now? Keegan asked. I wasn't. Push comes to shove, I have like a gallon of water in the back of my car, and maybe you can just like pour it over my head, then like throw some leaves at me? Sure, man, I can do that. We walked over to the trailhead. 10 yards from the start of the hike, a man slowly walked by us, carrying a walking stick. His face was so stoic, lost deep in thought. I recognized him. I looked at Keegan, who had noticed him as well. We kept walking, paying more attention than the scenery and the trees above our heads, overcompensating in our attempt to not disturb this wistful hiker. 100 yards down the trail, Keegan and I, now alone, turned to each other and both simultaneously said, Moby. I was a huge Moby fan in high school. His music got me through puberty. I've even used Moby songs to prepare for auditions. Crazy. Of all the places, I said. What are you talking about? Keegan asked. Moby belongs in the forest. If we bumped into him at like a Bed Bath & Beyond, that would have been weird. I turned and looked back up the trail toward the parking lot. Kind of wish we had said something. Keegan laughed. Well, we can always creep over and watch him from one of those trees with your binoculars if you want. I stopped in my tracks. I pictured my binoculars, my little Nikons, sitting on my kitchen counter. I'd forgotten them at home. Damn it! I yelled. My expletive echoed through the canyon, scaring birds from their nests. Birds that I could have seen if I had remembered my binoculars. Everything okay? Egan asked. I forgot my binoculars. What a silly thing to say. I'm not sure forgetting your binoculars warrants that kind of response. His voice sounded like a high school guidance counselor's. He was right. I promised him a short jaunt in the woods. I hadn't said anything about birding. Still, the anxious bird nerd in me worried that I might spot something and not be able to get a good look at it. We continued onward. Sand specks. Let's see if we're going to jump around. Oh, no, maybe we won't. Nah, we're going to skip. You don't need to hear that stuff. Anywho, here we go.